Cowboy found a woman in his barn and gave her shelter. Not knowing he'd found the love of his life, Caleb Mercer woke before sunrise, the way he always did. On this frontier planet, mornings were quiet and cold, and the sky often looked pale like old paper. He stepped onto the porch of his small ranch house and listened. No engines, no voices, no radio chatter from the settlement miles away, just wind, distant cattle calls, and the soft creak of wood. He liked it that way. Caleb lived far from town, far from trouble, far from people who asked too many questions. His ranch was simple, a weathered house, a barn, a corral, and wide land stretching into red desert. Some folks called it lonely. Caleb called it peaceful. He pulled on his boots, took his hat from the hook, and walked toward the barn with a lantern in one hand. The air smelled like dry dust and animals. The barn was his safe place, full of steady routine. Animals didn't lie. Fences didn't gossip. Hay didn't judge. Inside, he checked on his horses first. The old mare, Sable, lifted her head and snorted. Caleb rubbed her neck and gave her a calm pat. Then he moved down the row, checking water buckets and feed. Everything looked normal until he heard it, a sound that didn't belong. It was faint, like someone breathing too fast or fabric shifting in the dark. Caleb froze. His hand moved slowly to the small tool knife he kept at his belt, not because he wanted to use it, but because it made him feel prepared. He lifted the lantern higher. The light spilled over the hay bales near the back corner. At first, he saw nothing. Then a shadow moved, a person. Caleb's heart thumped. No one came to his ranch without making noise. No one even came at all unless they were lost or desperate. He took one careful step forward. "Who's there?" he called, keeping his voice low and steady. The shadow flinched. A woman's face appeared between the hay bales. Her eyes were wide with fear. Her hair was dark and tangled, and her cheeks were streaked with dirt. She wore a strange suit, not like any ranch clothing Caleb had seen. It was sleek and fitted, like it belonged in a lab or inside a ship, not in a barn. She tried to stand, but her legs trembled. She sank back down with a small gasp. Caleb lifted the lantern and saw something that made his stomach tighten. The woman's left arm had a burn mark near the shoulder, and her palm was scraped raw. She looked exhausted, like she had been running for hours. Caleb kept his distance, but he lowered the knife back into his belt. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said. "This is my barn. How did you get in here?" The woman swallowed hard. Her lips were dry. When she spoke, her voice was quiet and shaky. "Please," she whispered. Don't send me away." Caleb blinked. Most people who wandered onto private land demanded help or made threats. She sounded like someone who had been hunted. He crouched slightly to look less intimidating. "I'm not sending you anywhere yet," he said. "But you need to tell me your name." She hesitated. Caleb waited. He had learned long ago that rushing scared animals and scared people the same way. "My name is Alara," she finally said. Caleb nodded. "All right, Alara, I'm Caleb. Can you stand?" She tried again, pushing herself up with one hand. She made it halfway before her knees buckled. Caleb reacted on instinct. He stepped forward and caught her before she hit the floor. She was lighter than he expected, and her body was tense, ready to fight even while weak. Her breathing sped up, and her eyes darted toward the barn door as if she expected someone to burst in. Caleb held her steady. "Easy," he said. "You're safe right now." The words came out simple, but even Caleb didn't fully believe them. Safety was never guaranteed on this planet. The frontier had rules, but those rules only worked when people respected them. He guided her toward an empty stall where he kept blankets for cold nights. He laid one down on a clean pile of straw and helped her sit. Alara kept staring at the door. "They'll come," she said. Caleb frowned. "Who?" She swallowed again, like the word itself was dangerous. "I can't." Caleb did not push. He turned and grabbed a canteen from the shelf near the feed bags. He held it out. "Drink," he said. Alara hesitated, then took it with both hands. She drank slowly, like she expected the water to be a trick. When she finished, her shoulders relaxed a little. Caleb stepped back. "Are you alone?" She nodded. Then her eyes filled with tears that she tried hard not to show. Caleb's chest tightened. He had seen that look before in people arriving from the desert, people who had lost something or who had barely escaped something. He rubbed the back of his neck. "Okay," he said. "You're hurt. You're tired. If you're in danger, hiding in the barn is a start, but it's not the best plan." Alara looked up at him. "I didn't know where else to go," she said. "I saw lights. I saw animals. I thought maybe someone lived here." Caleb glanced down at her strange clothing again. It was clean in some places, torn in others, and the fabric had a faint shimmer. It didn't look cheap. It looked advanced. "Where are you from?" he asked carefully. Alara's fingers tightened around the canteen. She seemed to fight with herself. Finally, she said, "Not from here." Caleb almost smiled, but he didn't. He understood what she meant. "No kidding," he muttered. He stood and walked toward the barn door, peering outside. The land looked calm. A pink-orange light was spreading across the horizon. The wind rolled small waves through the dry grass. But something else sat in the air, something Caleb couldn't see. A kind of tension, like the world was holding its breath. Caleb had lived on the frontier long enough to recognize signs. When storms came, animals behaved differently. When raiders were near, even the birds went quiet. He listened. Far away, he heard a faint buzzing sound, almost like an insect. But it wasn't an insect, it was a drone. Caleb's eyes narrowed. He stepped back inside and shut the barn door quietly. He turned the lantern down lower so light wouldn't leak through cracks. Alara noticed his expression. "They're close," she whispered. Caleb did not answer right away. He walked to the small window on the side of the barn and looked out. In the far distance, he saw a tiny black dot moving across the sky. It drifted slowly, scanning the land in a smooth pattern. Corporate scouts. Caleb had seen them before around mining zones and transport lines. They were not supposed to fly this far from the settlement routes, not unless someone paid for the search. His jaw tightened. He looked at Alara again. The fear in her eyes wasn't random, it was earned. Caleb kept his voice controlled. "How long have you been running?" Alara's voice broke. "All night, maybe longer, I don't know, everything happened so fast." Caleb's mind moved quickly. If drones were searching, more could follow. Scouts usually came first. Then ground teams, then questions, then problems. He didn't want problems. He didn't want anything. He just wanted his ranch and his quiet mornings. But the woman sitting in his barn looked like she had no one else. Caleb walked to a shelf and grabbed a small med kit. He carried it back and knelt beside her. "I'm going to clean that burn," he said. Alara stiffened. "I can do it." Caleb paused, then nodded. "All right, but you'll use this." He handed her the kit and stood up again. He gave her space, turning away slightly as she opened it and pulled out a spray and cloth. While she worked, Caleb thought hard. If he turned her away, she might get caught. If he took her to town, someone might sell her out. Some people in town would do anything for credits. Some would do it just to feel powerful. Caleb stared at the barn floor. He had promised himself long ago he would never get pulled into anyone else's fight. But he had also promised himself he wouldn't be the kind of man who ignored someone in need. He exhaled slowly, like he was letting go of an old burden. Alara finished wrapping her arm. She looked up, waiting for his decision, her face careful and unsure. Caleb stepped closer. "Listen," he said. "I don't know what you're mixed up in, I don't know who's looking for you or why, but I saw a drone out there." Alara's face went pale. Caleb continued, "If they're searching, we need to be smart. You can stay here for now, but you'll have to trust me." Alara stared at him like she couldn't believe what she heard. "You'll help me?" she asked. Caleb nodded once. "Yes, for now." Her eyes softened and her shoulders dropped in a way that showed how tired she truly was. She looked down at her hands, then back up. "I don't want to bring danger to you," she said. Caleb gave a small, dry smile. "Danger finds people out here whether they invite it or not." He walked toward the back of the barn where a hidden storage space sat behind stacked crates. It wasn't secret to him, but it wasn't obvious to anyone else either. He had built it years ago for storms and emergencies. He turned back to her. "Come on," he said. "I've got a better place for you than a pile of hay." Alara stood slowly, wincing, but she did it. Caleb kept a steady hand near her elbow in case she fell again. As they moved, the drone's buzzing grew louder outside for a moment, then drifted away. Caleb's eyes stayed sharp. He knew this was only the beginning. Whatever Alara was running from had reached his land. And for the first time in years, Caleb Mercer felt his quiet life cracking open. He didn't know it yet, but the stranger in his barn was about to change everything. His ranch, his future, and his heart. The sun rose higher over the dry hills, turning the sky from pale pink to bright gold. Caleb stood near the barn door, watching the horizon carefully. The drone he had seen earlier was gone, but that did not mean the danger had passed. Machines like that rarely searched alone. Inside the hidden storage space behind the crates, Alara sat quietly on a folded blanket. The small space was simple but safe from outside view. Caleb had once used it during sandstorms when winds grew strong enough to tear roof panels loose. Now it was shelter for someone he barely knew. He brought her a plate of warm bread and dried meat along with fresh water. He placed it gently beside her. "You need strength," he said. "You won't think clearly on an empty stomach." Alara looked at the food like it was something rare. "Thank you," she said softly. Caleb nodded and stepped back, giving her room. He noticed how carefully she moved, as if she expected the world to shift beneath her at any moment. She ate slowly but with clear hunger. After a few minutes, she looked up. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. Caleb leaned against the wooden wall. "Because you needed help," he replied simply. She studied him. "Most people don't make choices that simple." Caleb gave a faint smile. "Most people don't live this far from town." Silence filled the small space, but it was not uncomfortable. Outside, the ranch moved through its normal morning routine. Cattle shifted in the pasture. Wind brushed against the barn walls. Everything looked calm, but Caleb felt the quiet tension underneath it all. After Alara finished eating, she closed her eyes briefly. Caleb noticed she seemed more alert now, less weak. "You said they're close," he said carefully. "Who are they?" Alara hesitated, then took a slow breath. "A private corporate unit," she said. "They track energy signatures." Caleb frowned. "Energy signatures." She glanced down at her hands, then back at him. "I was part of a research colony. We studied advanced neural technology. It allows a person to connect with machines to guide them." Caleb crossed his arms. "Guide them how?" Alara searched for simple words. "I can communicate with systems, not by touching buttons, by feeling their signals. I can sense patterns, send small commands. It's not magic, it's science." Caleb did not fully understand, but he understood one thing: she was valuable. "And they want you back," he said. "Yes," she replied quietly. "Not because they care about me, because of what I can do." Caleb studied her face. There was no pride in her voice, only exhaustion. Outside, a faint rumble rolled across the land. Caleb stepped toward the narrow crack between the boards and looked out. Two more drones moved across the distant sky, flying in a slow, sweeping pattern. "They're widening their search," he muttered. Alara's shoulders tightened. "If they detect a spike in energy, they will narrow in." Caleb turned to her. "Can they detect you here?" She shook her head. "Not unless I use my ability." Caleb nodded. "Then don't." Alara managed a small, tired smile. "I wasn't planning to." The morning passed slowly. Caleb stepped out of the barn several times, acting normal in case someone watched from afar. He fed the animals, checked the fences, and moved equipment like he did every day. If drones recorded his ranch, they would see nothing unusual. But his mind kept returning to the woman hidden behind wooden walls. By afternoon, heat waves shimmered across the desert ground. Caleb returned to the barn and sat on an overturned crate near Alara's hiding place. "You can't stay in that corner forever," he said. "It's too risky if someone lands nearby." Alara nodded. "I know." Caleb thought for a moment. "There's an old storm cellar behind the house, underground, hard to detect from air scans. It's not comfortable, but it's safer." Alara looked at him with surprise. "You're still planning to help me?" Caleb met her eyes. "I gave my word." Something softened in her expression. She had probably heard many promises before that were later broken. This one seemed to mean more. As the sun began to lower, Caleb waited for the right moment. When the drones moved toward the western ridge, he signaled her. "Now," he whispered. They slipped out the back of the barn and moved carefully across the yard. Alara walked slower than he did, but she forced herself to keep pace. The land stretched wide and open, offering little cover. Caleb hated that part. He preferred mountains and trees, but his ranch sat in flat country. They reached the small hatch behind the house. Caleb lifted it quietly and guided her down the narrow steps. The cellar smelled of cool earth and old wood. It was dark but solid. "This will work," Alara said softly. Caleb handed her a small lantern. "Stay here until night," he said. "I'll keep watch." She looked up at him. "You're taking a risk." Caleb shrugged. "I've taken worse." As he climbed back up and sealed the hatch, he felt something unexpected rising inside him. It wasn't fear. It wasn't regret. It was responsibility. That evening, Caleb sat on his porch with a metal cup of coffee, pretending everything was normal. The sky turned deep orange. The drones still circled, but farther away now. Just before sunset, a small transport ship appeared on the horizon. It hovered low, scanning the land. Caleb's jaw tightened. The ship did not land. It moved slowly over distant fields, then continued east. He waited until full darkness before opening the cellar hatch again. "Alara," he whispered. She climbed up carefully. In the dim moonlight, her face looked calmer than before. They didn't find you, Caleb said. Not today, she replied. They stood in silence for a moment, listening to the night wind. Why did you leave? Caleb asked gently. Alara looked toward the stars. Because they stopped seeing me as a person, she said. I became an asset, a tool. Every decision was made for me. Caleb understood that feeling more than he expected. After losing his family years ago, he had felt like life made decisions for him too. You're not a tool here, he said firmly. Alara looked at him, surprised by the strength in his voice. You're a guest, he added. And guests don't get hunted. A small smile touched her lips. They walked slowly toward the house. Caleb paused at the door. You can sleep inside tonight, he said. Couch isn't fancy, but it's better than dirt. Alara hesitated. Are you sure? Yes, he replied simply. Inside, the house was warm and quiet. Caleb lit a lamp and handed her a clean blanket. She looked around the simple room with curiosity. You built all this yourself? She asked. Most of it, he answered. She ran her fingers lightly over the wooden table. It feels peaceful. Caleb looked at her carefully. It won't stay peaceful if they keep searching. Alara nodded. They won't stop easily. Caleb leaned against the wall, thinking. Then maybe we stop running, he said slowly. Alara looked up. What do you mean? Caleb met her eyes. I mean we learn what they want. We prepare. This is my land. If they come here, they'll find I'm not easy to push around. Alara studied him with new understanding. You're not just a rancher, are you? Caleb gave a faint smile. I've lived long enough to know how to defend what's mine. Silence settled again, but this time it carried something different. Not fear, not uncertainty, partnership. As Alara lay down on the couch, exhaustion finally overtook her. Caleb dimmed the lamp and stepped back outside onto the porch. The stars stretched wide above him. In the distance, a faint light blinked near the horizon, too steady to be a star. Caleb narrowed his eyes. The search was tightening, but this time he was not alone. And somewhere deep inside, though he did not admit it yet, he felt something else growing stronger than fear. Hope. Night settled deep over the ranch, but Caleb did not sleep much. He sat in a wooden chair near the window, watching the land through a narrow gap in the curtain. The faint blinking light on the horizon had not moved for hours. It was steady and patient. Inside the house, Alara slept on the couch, wrapped in a thick blanket. For the first time since he found her in the barn, her breathing was calm and even. She looked younger when she slept, less guarded. Caleb rubbed his chin and thought carefully. If the transport ship stayed out there, it meant they were scanning slowly, waiting, watching. The longer they searched, the closer they would come. By early morning, he made a decision. When Alara woke, sunlight filtered through the window. She sat up quickly at first, confused, then remembered where she was. Caleb handed her a cup of warm tea. We need to move, he said, her eyes widened. They found us. Not yet, he replied, but they will. This land is open. It's easy to scan. We need cover. Alara nodded slowly. Where? There's an old canyon ridge about 10 miles west, Caleb said. Natural rock formations, hard for air units to get clear readings. I used to herd cattle through there years ago. Alara stood carefully. Her strength had returned, though she still moved with caution. If we leave, won't that draw attention? Caleb gave a small smile. Only if we leave obvious tracks. He moved quickly around the house, gathering supplies, water containers, dried food, tools, and 2 old communication jammers he once bought from a traveling mechanic. They were not powerful, but they could disrupt signals at close range. Alara watched him work. You planned for things like this before? She asked. Frontier life teaches you to plan for storms, he answered. Sometimes the storms just wear metal instead of clouds. They saddled 2 horses from the barn. Caleb chose Sable for himself and a calm younger mare for Alara. She hesitated before climbing into the saddle. You know how to ride? He asked. I've studied it, she said honestly, but I've never actually done it. Caleb blinked once, then nodded. You'll learn fast. They rode out slowly, keeping to rocky patches where tracks would not stay clear. Caleb guided them through dry creek beds and uneven ground. Alara focused hard, adjusting her balance with each step. After an hour, she found a steady rhythm. The land changed as they moved west. Flat fields turned into rising hills, and the air felt cooler. By midday, they reached the edge of the canyon ridge. Tall stone walls stretched upward, creating natural shade. The entrance was narrow and easy to defend. Caleb dismounted and studied the area carefully. This will do. They led the horses deeper inside, where the canyon widened slightly. Overhead, sharp rock edges blocked much of the sky view. Alara closed her eyes for a moment. "What are you sensing?" Caleb asked quietly. She opened her eyes slowly. "There's less signal interference here. The rocks reflect scans. It's harder for them to isolate movement." Caleb nodded. "Good." They set up a small camp near a stone outcrop. Caleb placed one jammer near the canyon entrance and kept the other close. As the afternoon passed, the sound of distant engines echoed faintly through the canyon walls. Alara's face tightened. "They're closer." Caleb climbed up a rocky ledge for a better view. In the far distance, near his ranch, he saw a transport ship finally descending. His jaw tightened. "They're on my land," he muttered. Alara climbed up beside him, careful with her steps. She saw the ship too. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Caleb shook his head. "Don't be." Through a small viewing scope he carried, Caleb saw figures stepping out of the ship. They moved in organized lines, scanning equipment in hand. "They'll search the house first," he said calmly. "Then the barn," Alara swallowed. "If they find nothing, they'll widen their radius." Caleb looked at her. "Can you track their systems?" She hesitated. "If I connect, they might detect the signal." "How long would you need?" "Just seconds," she replied. "Enough to see their pattern." Caleb thought carefully. "Do it, but only once." Alara closed her eyes and steadied her breathing. Her hands rested lightly against the stone wall. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Caleb noticed something small. The faint hum of his jammer shifted like it reacted to something unseen. Alara's brow tightened in focus. After a few seconds, she opened her eyes sharply. "They're using layered scans," she said quickly. "Thermal movement and neural resonance." Caleb frowned. "Neural? They're searching for unusual brainwave signatures," she explained. "Mine." Caleb's expression hardened. "Then we stay under rock." Alara nodded. "They're spreading out from your ranch now." Two ground teams moving west. Caleb calculated the distance in his head. "They'll reach the outer hills by evening." He climbed down from the ledge. "We don't run anymore," he said firmly. Alara followed him. "What are you thinking?" Caleb pointed toward a narrow passage deeper in the canyon. "There's a bottleneck path. Only two people can pass at once. If they send a ground unit in here, they'll have to move slow." Alara looked uneasy. "You're planning to confront them." "I'm planning to protect what's mine," he corrected gently. She studied him carefully. "You don't even know me." Caleb looked directly at her. "I know enough." The words settled between them, heavy and real. As evening approached, the sound of distant movement grew clearer. Small lights flickered beyond the canyon entrance. "They're here," Alara whispered. Caleb positioned himself near the narrow pass. He placed one jammer behind a rock and turned it on at low frequency. Moments later, two figures appeared at the canyon opening, wearing light armor suits and carrying scanning devices. They stepped cautiously inside. Their equipment flickered slightly as they moved deeper. Caleb stepped forward into view before they could advance farther. "That's far enough," he called calmly. The two officers froze, surprised. "This area is private property," Caleb continued, voice steady. "You've already searched my ranch. There's nothing here for you." One officer raised his scanner. "We have authorization to continue search operations." Caleb folded his arms. "Not without my consent." The scanner beeped unevenly, disturbed by the jammer signal. Alara remained hidden behind the rock wall, silent. The officers exchanged looks. Their equipment was unreliable inside the canyon. "We'll return with stronger units," one finally said. Caleb gave a slight nod. "You do that." They backed out slowly, retreating toward the entrance. Only when they were gone did Caleb allow himself to exhale fully. Alara stepped out from hiding. "You could have been arrested," she said quietly. Caleb shrugged. "Maybe, but they don't want a public issue with landowners." She looked at him with new respect. "You stood in front of them without fear." Caleb looked at the darkening sky. "Fear doesn't fix anything." Silence filled the canyon again. Alara stepped closer. "You didn't have to do that for me." Caleb looked at her for a long moment. The fading light caught the edges of her face, softer now, less frightened. "I'm not doing it just because you needed help," he said slowly. Alara's heart seemed to pause. "Then why?" Caleb hesitated, then answered honestly. "Because somewhere along the way, this stopped being just about danger." Alara's eyes searched his. He continued, voice steady but quiet. "You deserve to live free, not tracked, not owned." Emotion rose in her expression, but she held it back carefully. In the distance, the transport ship lifted into the sky, lights fading. "They'll regroup," she said. "Let them," Caleb replied. They stood together at the canyon edge, watching the stars appear one by one. For the first time since she arrived on his ranch, Alara did not feel alone in the fight. And for the first time in years, Caleb did not feel like he was protecting land out of habit. He was protecting something far more important. And deep inside, both of them understood that the next confrontation would decide everything. Morning light slowly entered the canyon, turning the stone walls warm gold. Caleb woke before Alara, as usual. He stood near the edge of the ridge, watching the distant horizon. The transport ship was gone, but that did not mean the danger had ended. People who searched like that did not give up easily. Behind him, Alara stepped out from the small shelter they had made between the rocks. She wrapped the blanket around her shoulders and walked toward him quietly. "They left," she said softly. "For now," Caleb replied. She followed his gaze toward the open land. From here, his ranch looked small and far away. Smoke from the chimney was gone and the yard looked empty. "I'm sorry about your home," she said. "They might come back." Caleb nodded slowly. "Maybe, but running forever isn't living." Alara watched him carefully. "You already decided something, didn't you?" He turned toward her. "Yes, we end this." She took a slow breath. "How?" Caleb walked toward their small camp and began gathering equipment. "They want you because of your abilities. That means they rely on technology to track you. We use that against them." Alara listened closely. Caleb continued. "If you can connect to their systems for a short time, maybe you can expose their operation, show the truth about what they're doing." She hesitated. "It's possible, but risky. If I connect too deeply, they can trace me." Caleb met her eyes. "Then we make sure they focus on me instead." Alara shook her head quickly. "No, I won't let you risk yourself like that." Caleb smiled gently. "You didn't ask me to help. I chose to." She felt emotion rise in her chest, but stayed focused. "If we do this, we need the right place." Caleb nodded. "Back at the ranch." Alara looked surprised. "Your ranch is the first place they'll search again." "Exactly," he said. "They won't expect us to return there." After a moment of thought, she nodded. "Then we do it together." They packed their supplies and began the journey back. The ride felt different this time. Alara sat more confidently on the horse, guiding it with growing skill. The wind carried the smell of dry grass and dust. The land stretched wide and endless, but now it felt less lonely. By midday, they reached the ridge overlooking Caleb's ranch. The place looked quiet. No ships, no ground teams, just empty land. Caleb studied the area carefully through his scope. "Clear," he said finally. They approached slowly, watching for any hidden traps or devices. The house door was slightly open, and footprints marked the ground where officers had walked earlier. Inside, nothing was destroyed. They had searched, but they had not stayed long. Alara stepped into the room and looked around. "It still feels peaceful," she said softly. Caleb nodded. "Let's keep it that way." They worked quickly. Caleb set up his communication equipment while Alara prepared herself mentally. She sat at the table, eyes closed, breathing slowly. "What will happen when you connect?" Caleb asked. "I'll access their network," she explained. "I can send their hidden files to public channels. If people know the truth, they can't continue chasing me quietly." Caleb leaned against the wall. "And after that?" Alara looked at him, unsure. "I don't know," he nodded once. "One step at a time." As sunset approached, a low humming sound filled the sky. Caleb stepped outside and saw the transport ship returning, descending slowly toward the ranch. "They're back," he called. Alara stood up, steady and focused. "Then we begin now." She placed her hands lightly on the metal communication console. Her eyes closed as she reached out with her ability. The air seemed to grow still around her. Lights on the console flickered. Outside, the transport ship hovered above the ground. 3 officers stepped forward cautiously. Caleb walked onto the porch, standing tall and calm. He knew they could see him clearly. One officer called out, "Step aside. We are continuing our search." Caleb crossed his arms. "You already searched." "We have authorization," the officer replied. Caleb remained calm. "You won't find what you're looking for." Behind him, inside the house, Alara focused deeply. Streams of data filled her mind like flowing rivers. She felt the network around the officers, the ship systems, the hidden servers holding information about countless operations. Her breathing slowed as she worked. Outside, the officers moved closer. "Last warning," one said. Caleb held his ground. "You don't belong here." Inside, Alara's eyes opened suddenly. "I found it," she whispered. With careful control, she released the information into open channels, reports of illegal tracking, forced experiments, and secret programs. The data spread quickly across communication networks. Outside, the officers' devices began to beep loudly. "What's happening?" one said, confused. Their scanners flickered as alerts appeared. Inside, Alara ended the connection and stepped back, breathing heavily but smiling slightly. "It's done." Caleb glanced over his shoulder and saw her standing strong. He felt relief flood through him. Outside, the officers received new messages. Their posture changed, uncertainty replacing confidence. One of them spoke into a communicator, voice tense. After a long moment, they stepped back toward the ship. "This operation is suspended," the officer announced. "We are leaving." Caleb watched silently as the ship lifted slowly into the sky and disappeared into the distance. The land grew quiet again. Alara walked onto the porch beside him. "It worked," she said softly. Caleb nodded. "You're free now." She looked at the wide horizon, then back at him. "I don't have to run anymore." Silence settled between them, but it felt warm and peaceful. "What will you do now?" Caleb asked gently. Alara thought for a long moment. The stars began to appear one by one above them. "I could go back to the colonies," she said slowly. "Start again somewhere else." Caleb listened quietly. Then she continued, her voice soft but sure. "But this place feels like home." Caleb's heart lifted slightly. "You'd stay," she nodded. "If you want me to." He smiled in a way he had not smiled in years. "I was hoping you would say that." They stood together, watching the sunset fade into night. The ranch felt alive again, filled with new possibility. Caleb realized that finding her in the barn had changed everything. What began as a simple act of kindness had turned into something deeper: trust, partnership, and love growing slowly between two people who had both been searching for belonging. The wind moved gently across the fields, carrying away the last signs of danger. And as they stood side by side under the wide frontier sky, both of them understood that this was not the end of their story. It was the beginning of a new life together.